All right. The first tier is titled Unproven and Worrisome. It includes the Tennessee Titans, where I'm not sure I need much of an explanation after the first year of the staff obviously gets the number 1 overall pick. Brian Callahan, your head coach, Nick Holtz, your OC, Denard Wilson, your DC. Not a lot of proven names there. Maybe not a lot of names you've even heard of in that unit. And obviously with the results last season, I'm worried after their year 1. Panthers, I'm throwing in this category as well. We have a first-time head coach in Dave Canales, last season. You have a first-time OC in Brad Idzik, who's John Idzik's son, former Jets GM, which funny story about this. I don't know if I told this on the pod at the time, but I'm flying from the Shrine Bowl to the Senior Bowl. So it's a flight from Dallas to Mobile. And obviously it's a direct flight. And it was the Monday of the Senior Bowl week. So like it's only NFL people on it. Yeah. I get down, I sit down. Guy next to me is wearing a CBS Sports hat. And he's like, I'm like, hey, how's it going? I know I have a buddy who works at CBS Sports. I know company. What's your name? He's like, John. I'm like, Mike, Renner, whatever. End of the flight, I'm like, looking at him like, dude, I feel like I recognize this guy. He's like, yeah, I do some scouting for them because he's like old. Turns out it was John Idzik. Turns out it was the former Jets GM, and I just did not.
He was chill
at the time, but he was a good guy. Yeah, didn't
people are very chill. Like airplanes, people think people go crazy. That guy's not real. People go crazy on airplanes all the time. I have some of the most chill experiences and interactions with people on airplanes. When things, when you finally sit down and the chime goes off, you've reached. There's nothing chiller than a conversation on an airplane. Nice to hear that a former GM was chilling.
So he's your OC, Ajiro Evera, your DC, but obviously with Panthers results last year, they make this tier. Next one, Dallas Cowboys, where I have not been shy of my criticism of Brian Schottenheimer and my feelings about him. Now their OC, Clayton Adams. Interesting choice here because he was an offensive line coach previously with Arizona the past 2 seasons. Rarity, but I think it's becoming less of a rarity nowadays.
Aaron Kromer did it.
Kromer, Stanovich is doing it with the Green Bay Packers. So I think it might just be a way of being like, hey, this guy's a great O-line coach. We need to.
Did Bill Callahan have any OCing? Was he OCing a little bit? Was he? You think he was shutting the door behind him, walking into the OC's room, like, hey, this is what we're doing?
I think he at one point did.
Okay.
But obviously got to be head coach also. Matt Eberflus, obviously the DC there, but they make this category for me. And then the last one is New Orleans Saints, where Kellen Moore is your head coach, Doug Nussmeier, your OC, and then Brandon Staley, your DC, obviously his time in the Chargers and what he did there defensively, not giving me much to be excited about this point in time. So there's my tier of unproven yet worrisome.
Okay, so the Panthers, the astral ascent of Dave Canales, going from coaching like high school ball in Arizona, right? He was like he was running summer school and summer practice like 6 years ago. Now he's a head coach. He's had to deal with Bryce Young and the ups and downs of having a rookie quarterback who was doubted. Obviously, he did a great job with Baker Mayfield, but we've seen from Dave Canales that his teams can play hard. They just don't have enough talent. And when you don't have the talent, you better have a scheme all-star up front or something else out of your sleeve. So for the Panthers, I agree on the unproven worrisome, but I do think that the arrow is trending up for this team because of the talent influx there. For the Cowboys, as somebody who's a Nepo baby, I'm not going to sit here and talk shit about Brian Schottenheimer, but what I will say is, as a first-time head coach, everybody's going to be looking at you to see how you deal with certain situations. Situational football is one of the things that we cover the most during the season. But how do you deal with certain personalities in the locker room and all things of that sort? And as a first-time head coach, you're always supposed to have somebody that you can fall back on that has that head coaching experience. Luckily, they've got a guy who is a head coach. Unfortunately for them, that guy is former Bears head coach.
Can I get to just the Nepo baby conversation? Because I think it's interesting because it's obviously become more commonplace in recent years because it's been like flooded, right? The NFL, you go any of these staffs, you will find a name whose father was a player, a coach, or whatever. It's just like, it is commonplace. But I do think there is something to the niche nature of coaching, and maybe not as much going forward with the dispersion of just coaching information and playbooks, things that being able to find them online, being able to see scheme. But 20 years ago, 2005, growing up, if you were coming out of college then, coming out of high school then, and wanted to be a football coach, wanted to get into football, there was no resources to figure out what I'm trying to think of the best scheme, like what Mike Martz was doing with the Rams at that time, right? You could not go break down film if you were an outsider. You couldn't get these things. But if you were the son of a coach, chances are you were learning the ins and outs of coaching since you were like 8 to 10 years old. So there was a argument to be made that these guys were legitimately more qualified. Now, from just like the general public, if now you get the dispersion of information and everyone has access to this stuff, and basically anyone who's intelligent and talented and wants to learn about football can and get into the NFL. I think we're going to see and hopefully see that net widen. And I think you're with some of these young OCs that we're going to get to in time that like they're not Nepo babies. They've just been guys who prove themselves over and over again. But I do think it gets a bad rap in coach circles. There is obviously it is a who do you know, who are you friends with sort of league. That's how you get hired more often than not. But also it's like these guys probably had a higher floor to begin with. These guys probably were coming into these rooms. They were easy initial hires for a lot of teams because they knew more about coaching than your run-of-the-mill 23-year-old coming out of college.
I agree with you in large part about a number of things. But a few things I want to say. As a player, it's obvious that like
it doesn't matter.
There were things that I inherited from my dad that made life a little bit easier on the football field because of my explosiveness, twitchiness, whatever, my ability to see the game. As a coach, I would argue that the best coaches and oftentimes the best players are coaches' sons. But I think that it is to a point, though.
Yeah.
When your dad is an NFL coach, for the most part, you never see your dad. You never see your kids if you're coaching in the National Football League. Now, the benefit of the doubt that I'll give to Brian Schottenheimer is go take a look at how long he's been in the NFL, how long he has actually been in buildings, on staffs. It is very impressive.
28 years.
To hear that number. That stands out to me, and it allows me to rid myself of that nepotism conversation because obviously everybody has a certain degree of nepotism. You said it's a who do you know league. Former players looking to get hired as coaches, they're going to go with coaches that they played for. You know what I'm saying? There is that net. But I'll say this. I'm looking forward to the kids that had to innovate and didn't have somebody that taught them how to paint the picture, and they learned how to paint the picture themselves, because that's how you get these boy geniuses that show up on your doorstep and start whipping up the nasty stuff offensively.
That's what I'm saying is I think we are going to see a generation of that start to come into the NFL just because this is the first time. So say you graduate high school 2015, you could probably, at least in college and somewhat throughout your high school career, you could have like actually been looking up schemes. Hey, here's, I love what what Andy Reid's doing. I can go watch his offense. You have access to all 22 to watch.
We couldn't do that growing up.
Exactly. Like if I wanted, I remember like I was obsessed with draft prospects. All I would do is be able to, watch on Saturdays and then open up a magazine come spring. Like that's all I had at my disposal.
Yeah.
So, kids nowadays don't know how good they have it. If they really want to pursue something that they're interested in, you got all the information at your hands to go dive deep into. So I do think we'll see a lot of people coming from less traveled paths going forward, at least hopefully. But I kind of have a different take on Schottenheimer, not to keep on this point a little bit. But if you are the son of Marty Schottenheimer, obviously former NFL head coach, legend in his own right, and it takes you 28 years to get a head coaching job, he's been at his stops now in the NFL. He's been with the Rams, the Chiefs, Redskins formerly, Chargers, Jets, Rams again, Colts, Seahawks, Jags, Cowboys now. So what was that, 9 stops?
Yep.
9 stops in the league. And like, if you truly were, an innovative mind, if you truly were showing,
You would have
the way Kyle Shanahan was, right? If you were
those
that,
guys stick around when people get fired. Those guys stick around.
yes. So that's my only pushback and why I put him in this category. All right, let's get off.
I will say this though, Saints.
Trash people.
I like Kellen Moore a lot. Nussmeier,
Okay.
I like Nussmeier. I don't know if he's a great OC, but I'll say this about Brandon Staley. He is a much better DC than he is a head coach. And you'll find a number of these guys that are
be a worse DC.
What's that?
Hard to be a worse DC than he was.
Well, I got to see him as a position coach in Chicago. So I got to watch him work with outside linebackers every day and get that front seven together. And he was fantastic. I mean, that's the kind of guy that you want to play for. That's really all I can say about that staff. But you get two players type coaches with Kellen Moore and with Brandon Staley. And obviously Nussmeier's a player's coach. He's got a kid who does it. Mm-hmm. It seems like a cool staff there. They're going to build something cool, and they got a lot of acreage to build. They don't have a lot of legs to stand on right now.
I will say this. I think a lot of his problems at head coach were a messaging problem, like that. If he's just a DC and just an X's nose guy, I do agree that maybe I'm being a little harsh on that. All right, let's go to the next tier here. It's called the unproven but encouraging tier. So we really don't know. I think every single staff here that I put is either has no more than 2 years of experience in the league. So I didn't want to really go out and say, they're for sure top of the market guys. Some of these I love. Like some of these staffs, I'm like, yeah, I think I'd put these among the top 10 staffs in the league if I just had to, but it really is too early to say for any of them. This includes the Arizona Cardinals, where I love Jonathan Gannon as a DC, or technically not the DC, but like what he does is play calling defense side of the ball. Drew Petzing, your OC, Nick Rawlis, your DC. I think they've overachieved each of the past 2 seasons. The Atlanta Falcons I put in this tier, where obviously Raheem Morris, what he did in his time in LA as DC, I thought I was very impressed with, getting more out of less there. Zach Robinson as OC, I'm obviously a little biased there with his time at PFF, being a buddy of mine, but the results when they had Michael Penix in there, I think, speak for themselves. Ooh. And then Jeff Ulbrich at DC coming over from the Jets, where he was the interim head coach there.
He needs to defend his iPad.
All right, Texans are the next one here, where maybe you could even just like put them in one of these higher tiers because of the first 2 seasons Miko Ryan's making the playoffs in both of them. But I do think I put him here because of Nick Caley, your OC, obviously at Bobby Slowick the past 2 years. He comes over from LA. Not sure where we're going to get from him. Matt Burke, your DC. I think it's a tremendous staff. Again, this is one of the ones where it's like, it's just like if you gave me this staff, I would probably say it's a top 10 staff if you had to make me rank them. But because of the way I'm doing these tiers, they go into this one. The Bears, Ben Johnson, I can rave about him as a play caller, and I have over the past year and just over the past his tenure with the Lions, but we still don't really know how he's going to be as a head coach. Declan Doyle, we talked about these young guns coming up. He was 28 when he was hired. He was the tight end coach in Denver the last 2 years to be the OC. And then Dennis Allen, for as much as a head coach was kind of meh, he's always been a very solid defensive coordinator. So that's a very, very good staff. But just again, until we see it, this is the tier they go into. But the Seahawks in here, I love Clint Kubiak as an OC. I've made no bones about it. I think he very much overachieved when the Saints were healthy last year. That didn't last long, obviously, but when they did, that offense was explosive. Mike McDonald has kind of revolutionized defensive coordinator at the NFL level and how he coaches it. A lot of people are going to his defenses. He is kind of at the bleeding edge of that. And then obviously Aiden Durden, your DC, former Cowboys defensive line coach. Jaguars, I put in this tier. Liam Cohen, we raved about him like seemingly every single Monday last year. I'm very excited to see what he does with this Jaguars, and it's all the talent they have at the playmaking positions offensively, as well as Trevor Lawrence. You got Grant Udinski, another one of these young guns, 29 years old. He was the assistant offensive coordinator for the Vikings a year ago. That's not a bad offense. If you're going to poach an offense,
it's a lot of brain power in that room there.
Yeah. And then Anthony Campanelli, your DC, coming over from the Green Bay Packers. For the Jaguars and just where you thought they were and their ability to poach a staff and just the history of the Jaguars, I can't believe they got as good a staff as they did, truthfully. So
no offense to any other nationalities, but Italians, they do defensive coordinator just a little different than everybody else.
Vic
Just ask
Fangio,
Vic Fangio.
obviously chief amongst them.
Yeah, you got to get an Italian DC. Come on.
Jets are up next, where obviously just kind of took the Lions staff. Aaron Glenn, your head coach. Tanner Engstrand, your OC, comes over from Detroit. Steve Wilkes, obviously much traveled, former Arizona Cardinals head coach. Lasted 1 year, though. He's their DC. Colts make this tier. Again, another staff where you can maybe even just put them in the like they're a little bit more proven than this. Your DC's Lou Anarumo. His track record outside of 2024 speaks for itself. Shane Steichen, your head coach. His obviously track record as OC speaks for itself. And then Jim Bob Cooter, all name team as your offensive coordinator. It's a very good staff. The Lions I put in this tier. Obviously, Dan Campbell as a head coach. This isn't a head coaching staff ranking, right? This is a entire coaching staff ranking. And when you lose your OC and DC, and when you're as good as they were, we just don't know. Especially when your OC is a first-time OC, and John Morton, who was a passing game coordinator for the Broncos the past 2 years. And then your DC is one of the youngest DCs in the league, 37 years old. Kelvin Shepard literally played for the Lions in 2018. His last year in the league was involved
in still got a locker in the locker room, dude.
It was involved in one of the most lopsided trades of all time in retrospect. He was traded straight up for Jerry Hughes in 2013. Kelvin Shepard in 2014 was no longer on the Colts. Jerry Hughes, well, he just had double-digit sacks the next 2 seasons for the Buffalo Bills, became one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. So
I remember that.
There is your tier of unproven
problem,
yet very encouraging.
Okay, great job, by the way. And again, this is that, people were getting pissed because we put the Bears in the unknown category, offensively last 2 weeks ago or whatever it was. This is you're going to get some hate for this, but
academic honesty.
I understand why these teams are all on here. Lions. I mean, you lost 2 all-stars at the coordinator spot. You still have that great roster, but are you going to have that je ne sais quoi offensively? Are you going to be healthy enough? Is your coach on defense good enough to keep this defense, if it's ailing from a health standpoint, competitive? Colts, we talked about it. Italian DCs. Lou Anarumo, I've seen firsthand that this guy is a problem.
You need that vowel.
But he was also his group was a real problem last year too, and not in the cool way. So for the Colts, they need to figure out something. They got a lot of killers in that front seven. It'll free up Lou Anarumo on the back end. Shane Steichen we like, but I mean, unless you can get that spark plug working at the quarterback spot, it's tough to really get a judge of what the hell's going on. Tanner Engstrand has a unique job to do this year, and I'm excited to watch it happen because we know that Justin Fields is smart enough, athletic enough to run any type of offense. Let's see what Tanner thinks is the best thing for the Jets. For the Jags, we don't even have to talk about it. It's going to be a ton of fun to watch that group. Seahawks, it feels like they're going to smash people at the line of scrimmage between Clint Kubiak and Mike McDonald. Aiden Durd is British. I didn't know that.
Yes. Yes, he was born in
Middlesex,
England. Yeah.
Don't worry, I looked it up. I
think that's all the wave nowadays, right? Middlesex.
I like him. Yeah, that's right. That's good. He's ahead of his time. And then the Bears. Look, Dennis Allen is in a lot of eyes an upgrade from Matt Eberflus as the DC. But it goes back to that conversation that I had with Ben Johnson being a first-time head coach, being at the front of the room, offense, defense, and special teams, every man to a man, listening to one man. That's Ben Johnson's job. How's he going to do that, dude? Do you think he's going to be all right being a head coach?
That part. So I do think he is going to not be Dan Campbell in a number of ways. Like he is not going to be like the true leaders of men that you talk about around the NFL. He's not going to be that. Your Mike Vrabels, your Mike Tomlins, your Dan Campbells, those guys who really have that. Andy Reid's even, who really have.
He could be McVay. Command.
I don't even know about McVay. I just don't think he has the dynamism of personality, the command in terms of verbally to get a room. But, there's other guys around the league. Like, I don't think Matt LaFleur is that.
Or Shanahan.
Yeah. Those
for that
guys.
matter.
And I think he can be that, what they are to their respective
Great.
team, right? So if you're in that, and we'll see when we get to those guys' tier, there's some pretty high tiers, those head coaches and those staffs. So yeah, I'm not too worried about the Chicago Bears.
Is the foundational strength of Dennis Allen as the head coach in the building strong enough for Ben Johnson to stand on this season?
I thought that was a great hire. I thought it was, if you're going to hire Ben Johnson, obviously Declan Doyle, I think, is a purely just, he hired Declan Doyle to be in a lab 24/7 trying to create new shit, so to speak. I think that's all that is. And then Dennis Allen is
he's like automation. You just put him to the side and let him just
he's like AI. There you go. He's a chat GPT. You're just putting in prompts and you let him go to work. Whereas Dennis Allen's like the guy who's kind of going to be more in the weeds, more hands-on. And I thought it was a great hire, just given how much he's been around the league, the positions he's been in, that kind of has some stability to bring to that staff when it truthfully, with the head coach and OC, could use it.
So last thing I'll say about Declan Doyle, tight end coach in Denver the last 2 years. One thing that's unique about people who play or coach the tight end position is that they live in both worlds, the line of scrimmage and the shell, the second level, because they have to deal with blocking combinations. They've got to deal with mic calls. They have to understand protections. So to have a guy like that in the lab as your AI, your automated play call or playmaker, it's really nice for the Bears. And he's young, so you can still mold that young sponge, whereas Dennis Allen, probably pretty stuck in his ways. Mm-hmm. The biggest swing staff is the Houston Texans. And here's why. We know that it didn't work last year with protection for CJ Stroud, and he had a monumental dip in performance. But you and I had points in which we said, hey, some of this could have been Bobby Slowick. We were not in those meeting rooms, but obviously the protection was the biggest reason. If Nick Caley can come in and find a way to right the ship and get the vibes right in that room, it's going to be huge. And a couple of things I found out about Nick Caley that stand out to me. Born in Canton, Ohio. Okay? Born in Canton, Ohio, where the greatest football players reside. So Ohio is like football, football, football. I love that from this guy. Also, he was a tight ends guy. He was a tight ends coach with the Rams, and he was there with Gronk when like 15 through 22. So he's got a number of Super Bowl rings. He's been around Tom Brady. He's been around big-time teams, big-time games, and I feel like that could be a real, gust of wind in the sails of a guy like CJ Stroud, who's in need of a pick-me-up. I'm not saying he's down in the dumps, but look, not playing well sucks in the NFL. And if you can get some help, great. And I think Nick Caley can be a big part of that. That's the biggest X factor out of this whole group.
All right, let me put you on the spot here before we get to the next tier. Of all these teams, and I'm going to take the Bears out of it because I don't want you to have any, which one would you take? Of all these staffs, which one would you take? You can't take it.
Man, oh man, oh man. Which staff would I take? And it's not the Bears. It's hard for me to pick between the Jaguars and what I've seen from, or schematically what I like from the Falcons. Yeah. I like the Jaguars and I like the Falcons because I like Raheem Morris. He seems like a guy who gets it and that players really probably gravitate towards. Zach Robinson is just like, you've raved about him forever. Jeff Ulbrich looks like a Marvel character. Anytime that you have a coach that looks the part, it really means something in our business because you don't just wake up looking the part. This guy has had to go day in, day out to get the look of Ulbrich, the beard, the muscles, everything. Okay. Defense isn't that hard. You just need a guy out there who's just going to be jacked and get guys fired up. Offense is where it gets confusing. That's why I like Zach Robinson. And obviously from a leadership standpoint, I talked about Raheem Morris.
I'll lay one up for you. If I had to pick out all these, I would take the Bears. I'm not biased here. Unfortunately, I'm actually biased against the Bears, and that is the staff I would take.